Okay, welcome back. Today we're discussing something really important, and that is whether or not interest rates have to go up and why we continue to recommend variable rates over fixed rate mortgages. And this is something, it comes up in the comments all the time. People make this assumption that rates absolutely have to go up. They can't get any lower, which means they have to move in an upward direction. And I'm going to explain today my thoughts on why that isn't necessarily true and why we continue to, again, recommend those variable rates. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. Don't forget about that race to 25,000 subscribers, where one lucky winner is going to win $5,000 when we hit 25,000 subscribers. And we just hit 17,000, and I have good news. The number of subscribers is climbing quickly again. So to the 17,000 of you who have already subscribed, thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead, click that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, and it's definitely worth it. The definitive guide on how to manage your credit: product, penalty, price, in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's discuss why interest rates don't necessarily have to go up and why we continue to recommend variable rates. And let's compare this real quickly to the whole thought process around playing roulette. So you walk into a casino, maybe you're in Vegas because we're allowed to do that again, or maybe you're at the local casino and you walk up to the roulette table and you see that the roulette table has been rolling blacks for the last 10 turns. It's black, 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 black. And as a result, you look at that and you go, well, it absolutely has to come up red because it's been rolling black every single time for the last 10 turns. So you take your life savings, or in this case, your mortgage amount, and you stick it on red because you know that black has been coming up consistently for the last little while, and therefore red has to come up eventually. And now's the time to put all your money and all your life savings on red as a result. And you know, you think that because black has been coming up over and over and over again, that the statistics say that it should come up red, but that's not true. Because in reality, if you just take out the two green spots and you look at black versus red, there's a 50-50 probability that the next turn is going to actually be red. So you make this assumption thinking, oh, it's been black, it's been black, it's been black. So I got to pick red because it's going to come up red eventually, thinking that there's a high likelihood that that will happen. But the reality of it is there's only a 50-50 chance of red coming up. And this is what people are basically saying when they say interest rates have to go up because they've gone lower and lower. They're at the lowest they can go, and now they have to go up. And then not only that, people add to that they have to go up substantially because that's what happened in the 80s. So therefore, we're using the previous information or past information to make choices about the future. And just like in roulette, that past information can lead us to make bad decisions. And that's in a nutshell, the reason why we aren't encouraging people to take fixed rates. It's because we can't use that theory of, well, they're low, so they have to go up in order to make that decision. No, we have to look at the actual numbers and the actual data. So let's talk about the actual numbers and the actual data. So first and foremost, people are looking at inflation numbers right now going, holy crap, they're high. So that must mean that interest rates have to go up. Well, let's take a quick look at that. This is one of the most recent articles from a BIS study that argues that inflation is transitory. So after all this time, we still have economists and we still have researchers going, yeah, this seems to be transitory based on supply issues and based on things that are happening in the economy due to coronavirus. So you take a look at this and you go, okay, here's the inflation rates and here's the forecasts. And pretty much across the board, most economists, most people are saying inflation doesn't have to continue to go up. It looks like it's going to come back down. And therefore, that should lead us to more stable interest rates down the road. So that's the first piece of the argument. Now, the next piece of the argument is there's a whole bunch of other things that come along with increasing interest rates. And the general rule of thumb is that a recession is 2 periods of negative GDP growth in a row. And once you have 2 periods of positive GDP growth, then you're no longer in a recession anymore. And that's the mainstream definition. But there's another definition with respect to recessions that is becoming more common and is more, I think, accurate. And that is that in order for you to really be out of a recession, you have to get to a new high with respect to GDP. And if you take a look at GDP numbers, I want to show you this because The end of this chart here is the most recent GDP numbers that just went down slightly. And what you can see is that this is the drop in GDP in March of 2020, where we saw the lockdowns during the pandemic. And as you can see, even though things have been going really well in the economy, or seem to be going really well in the economy the last little while, we still aren't back to those previous GDP numbers. And that is going to be what it takes in a lot of cases for us to start to feel like we aren't in a recessionary period and like we're better off overall. And for us to get out of a recessionary period and for consumers to really feel like they're better off overall, things have to feel like there's more money and more availability of resources in order to purchase those resources, and basically like we're in a better position than we were pre-pandemic. And that's just not where we are. We've got some room to go with respect to GDP numbers. Now, if that doesn't convince you that interest rates may not go up soon, well, then let's take a look at the next piece of data, which is jobs data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of myself here and just show you what the jobs data looks like. So this is jobs vacancy rates, and I've outlined the Canada numbers, and you can go ahead and you can look at this and you can see, okay, pre-pandemic, about 3% of jobs that were available were unfilled. Now we're at about 5%. That's because people have gotten used to not going to the office and they are taking their EI or their CERB benefits and choosing not to work. Now that's a really interesting piece. And then we go and we look at unemployment. This is the unemployment rate, which is a little bit different than job vacancies, but the unemployment rate, as you can see right now, is still at 7.8%, which is up from pre-pandemic levels of 2019. So the point I'm trying to make here with all of this is that we're in a scenario where people are believing that interest rates have to go up because that's just what happens when they're low. And the reality of it is we have a whole bunch of things we have to deal with. We have to deal with transitory inflation. It's probably going to go negative going into 2022 as supply bottlenecks start to unwind, and primarily as shipping containers become more available and things go back to normal. By the way, the shipping container industry, which is one of the biggest factors with respect to the supply chain and higher costs, it's a very cyclical industry. There is very frequently times where shipping costs go through the roof and then they almost always come back to somewhat normal. This happens when there's strikes in ports. This happens when there's bottlenecks like ships getting stuck in canals. It just is something that generally happens and it tends to come back to normal. So when that comes back to normal, we can expect that prices on things will probably come back to normal. Then we have to deal with GDP numbers, the fact that we aren't producing at the same level as pre-pandemic. So that's going to take a while to come out of the economy. And then we have to deal with unemployment. So the thought process around the fact that interest rates have to go up, there is just, it's not quite there yet. Now, I'm not saying that they won't go up, but what I'm saying is that when we're making mortgage decisions, we don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know is what the future looks like. But what we do know is that for the next foreseeable future, we're still going to have low interest rates, and we don't know what the velocity of those interest rates will look like when they increase. So when we're making decisions and recommendations with respect to variable versus fixed, that's what we're looking at. And here's something else that I want to show you, because when we go ahead and we take a look at the Bank of Canada overnight rate since the 1930s, 1935 to be exact, when the Bank of Canada was established, what we can see is that interest rates tend to go up and down, and they vary, right? So the big fear for people taking 5-year fixed rates right now is that interest rates are going to go up at some point, and then they're going to continue to go up. And if they don't lock in now, they're going to pay significantly more over time. Well, I want to show you a couple things with respect to interest rates. So first and foremost, if we go over here, and we can pretty much ignore the right side of the chart where my face is covering right now, because that's right now. That doesn't matter. That's what the most recent years look like. But what I want to show you is I want to show you what happens when interest rates get low. So this is going back to 1935. Interest rates at this time are around 2%. You see that there's some sort of an issue here around the end of the war where interest rates come down. And then we get this bump up in interest rates of about 2% that happens over a 2-year period. Now, that's a pretty big increase in interest rates. But what happens very quickly is over the next year, interest rates come back down almost to what they were previously. So the net increase over a 5-year period was probably about 0.75% when you average it out over that 5-year period. In fact, you can see that when you get to the point where you have interest rates coming back down, they come back down to almost what they were pre-spike. Now, obviously, this is a 15 to a 25-year period between here and here. But what I'm showing you is that even when interest rates do go up, they have a tendency to come back down. And when they do go up, they tend to take a long amount of time before they start to increase. Now, if we're looking at 1935 in comparison to 2021, I would say that right now we're at the very beginning of this increase in interest rate cycles. We're at the low, and that the likelihood of seeing big interest rate increases is probably very small. And if we do, what we're probably going to see is we're going to see spikes and then valleys, and ultimately over, let's call it a 25, 35, 40-year period, we're probably not going to see interest rates go up very substantially. And if they do go up, we're probably going to see them come back down. But the reality here is that we don't know what the future of interest rates looks like a year or 2 or 3 years down the road. All we know is that we are probably going to have low interest rates for at least the next year and potentially longer. So the reason why we recommend variable interest rates is because we can take advantage of the lower interest rates right now and wait and see what happens in the economy. And if interest rates look like they're going to start to go up, then pretty much every variable rate mortgage on the market has the ability for a borrower to call their broker or call their lender and say, hey, I want to lock in to a fixed term mortgage, and you can do that almost instantaneously. So what we're recommending is that we take advantage of the lower interest rates right now, and then when it looks like interest rates are going to start to rise, if they start to rise, we're probably going to recommend at that point that people start looking at locking in. Now, I want to go back to this chart real quick here because I do want to show you real quickly that between 1935 and basically 1955, which is a 20-year period, interest rates didn't just not go up, but they went down. And if you remember, when interest rates got to 2% at the end of 2010, everyone thought, interest rates will never go lower than this. And then lo and behold, 2020 hits and we get interest rates below 1%. I'll remind you about the HSBC 0.99% interest rate. So now let's take this to the next step of this conversation and let's talk about what this looks like from a variable versus fixed standpoint. So right now, if you were to look at variable versus fixed mortgages, a variable rate is coming in at about 3/4 of a point lower than a fixed rate mortgage. So let me show you what that looks like on a $500,000 mortgage. So in the first year, what that means is if you choose variable over fixed, you're going to save $3,750. We know that we've got about a year because the Bank of Canada has said it's going to take at least a year before interest rates are in a position where they start to go up. Now, that doesn't mean they will go up, but that means that it's going to take at least until the end of 2022 before we see interest rate increases. That's what they're telling us right now. It could take even longer. If it takes longer, let's say it takes 2 years for interest rates to go up, we'll take $3,750 and times it by 2. That's your savings from a variable interest rate. Now, what happens if they do increase interest rates by 1/4 of a point next year? Well, then we're only saving $2,500 for the amount of time that interest rates are at that rate. And then let's say they increase it by another 1/4 of a point, some point after that. Well, then we are saving $1,250 per year until they increase interest rates again. Now, at this point, maybe they keep increasing interest rates. Maybe interest rates start to come down. Who knows? But we're still saving even with a 0.5% increase. And if interest rates go up again by 1/4 of a point, now we're saving $0 a year compared to the 5-year fix we could have got originally. But we are still in a position where we've saved that $3,750 per year, then that $2,500 per year, then that $1,250 per year. So even if interest rates go up by 3/4 of a point, we're still ahead because we've spent all of this time at these interest rates, right? We've spent all the time at those interest rates saving money. So then interest rates go up again, another 1/4 of a point. And now we're losing $1,250, but that's canceling out one of the previous rate increases. Then they go up again, 1.25%. Then we're losing $2,500 per year compared to that fixed rate. And then they go up by another 1/4 of a point. We're at 1.5%. And now we're in a position where if over 5 years, interest rates changed 6 times and went up by 1.5%, we're basically in a break-even scenario. Now, if you look at that chart that I showed you previously, that is the chart that shows that interest rates for basically 20 years stayed very low and actually went down on occasion. Well, then it makes sense to start thinking about locking in some of these savings by taking a variable rate mortgage and waiting to see what will happen if interest rates are actually going to go up. And that's the trick here. We want to wait and see. We want to know that we're saving money right now. And if interest rates eventually do look like they are going to go up, then at that point in time, then we'll start looking at fixed rate mortgages. But for now, why would you take a fixed rate mortgage, pay $3,750 more per year to the bank, not knowing for sure if rates are actually going to go up, and end up paying them significantly more upfront? And then also, if you were going to get out of that mortgage, let's say you want to move or you need to pay it out for whatever reason, taking that 5-year fix is going to have a significantly higher penalty as well, which means you're not only paying more on the front end, but more on the back end. And overall, you're going to have a significantly higher cost of mortgages over the life of the mortgage. So that's why we're recommending variable rates. That's why we're recommending you lock in, but we aren't saying you lock into a fixed rate. We're saying you lock in the savings and take a wait and see approach with respect to what interest rates are actually going to do, because there's lots of evidence that suggests that interest rates won't go up anytime soon. And there's lots of evidence to suggest that just assuming that they're going to go up because they've been low for a long period of time isn't the right choice. And quite simply, it's not the right choice because you wouldn't walk into a casino, look at 10 rolls of black on the roulette table, and then assume that as a result of that, you have a really high chance of winning because the number has to come up red, when in reality, you only have a 50-50 chance of winning on that bet. So that's why we continue to recommend variable rates. That's why we continue to recommend smart and strategic mortgage planning. By the way, if you're looking to get into the mortgage market, we have a course called Secrets to Getting the Lowest Interest Rate. It's linked in the description below with a 50% off coupon, the 50% off the already discounted price. I encourage you, if you're looking to get into the market and you think interest rates matter and you're still confused or still looking for information on how to make a smart mortgage choice, sign up for that course. And if not, I still hope you found this video useful. Do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. Don't forget about that race to 25,000 subscribers, and we'll see you on the very next one. Cheers.